Okay, thanks for coming, everyone. Welcome. I'm Janet Barlow, and I'm the Executive Director of Hike Nova Scotia. And thanks for joining us for our Stronger Boards New Approaches and Burning Questions webinar. This is the third and final in our series of Stronger Board webinars. And it is offered as part of the Trail Sector Capacity Building Project through Hike Nova Scotia's Trail Builders Network. And it is supported by the Nova Scotia Department of Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage. The Trail Builders Network is our capacity building hub for trail groups, First Nations, and municipalities that build and maintain hiking trails. We represent the largest group of trail users, and we represent trail building groups. Hike Nova Scotia was approached by CCTH, Communities, Culture, Tourism, and Heritage, to spearhead this project because they see, as we've seen as well, that many trail group boards are struggling to keep their organizations afloat. Volunteers are hard to find, they're aging out, and for folks who just want to build and maintain trail or just go and use trails, the board stuff can be challenging. So we hope this webinar series will help, and it's for all groups in the trail sector. And I do want to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, which is the traditional and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And the Mi'kmaq were the first hikers, and there are trails in this province that have been used for thousands of years. A little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So this will be around an hour and a half, depending on how many questions we get. If you have questions, please raise your hand using the icons or just literally raise your hand if your video is on, and Grant will answer some questions per slide. But otherwise, we can answer questions at the end. But with a small group, we could probably sprinkle them throughout, I guess. Hey, Grant. And if you could stay muted throughout to cut down on background noises, and if you keep your videos turned off to avoid visual distraction and clutter while the presentation's going on, that would be great. And technical problems, just check your confirmation email. And before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about Hike Nova Scotia. We are a provincial nonprofit, and we're just trying to grow a culture of hiking throughout the province. We strive to be the voice of those who hike, walk, and snowshoe, as well as those who build and maintain hiking trails. We're all about hiking promotion, education, and just encouraging people to get out onto the trails. And we do this in a number of ways. So we offer our seasonal guided hike and walk series. We run the NS Walks walking group program. We run the Hiking Summit annual conference, and the latest one is coming up May 30th in Bridgewater. We offer a number of skill building in-person courses as well as webinars. We promote the International Appalachian Trail in the province. We have the Hiker Challenge where you can earn badges. We have the Young Hikers Club, and there's the Trail Builders Network. We are member-based, and paid members get lots of perks and discounts. We also have a website and social media, which are great resources for hiking and trail information and events. And more webinars in this series are coming up. So we've gone through the top 5 now. We have one coming up on mental health and trails, as well as on volunteer recruitment and retention. And we also have a project where we'll have 2 trail support coordinators that can serve a handful of trail groups that can apply to receive that support. I'll be sending something out soon to groups around how you can apply for that. And now for the good stuff. This is what you're here for. So tonight's presenter is Grant McDonald, an adult educator and consultant living in Dartmouth. He has a long-standing and enthusiastic interest in nonprofit governance and leadership. Grant is a former Dalhousie professor in continuing education, and I actually took his Improving Nonprofit Governance Certificate program offered through DAL a number of years ago. He keeps the Governing Good website, which focuses on nonprofit leadership practice, providing insights for boards and senior executives. So take it away, Grant. I will turn my video off.
Thank you, Janet.
Yeah.
And welcome to Danielle and Dale, who were in with us the last 2 times. And I don't know, Michelle is our other participant. And Michelle, have you been to any of the other 2 of these Stronger Boards sessions?
All of them so far.
Okay, all right. So we've got three of you familiar with the topic and having participated, and I'm hoping that this last of the three will add some value to your work with your boards. And I'm going to start off, not suggesting that you leave questions to the end, but maybe a couple of slides to kind of draw you out, see if you've done some thinking before the session. Janet sent out some reminders, so we'll start off the second or third slides in with some questions, and I will try to make a list of things that we could talk about in addition to the things I've already prepared. So let's get into it. Anyways, nice to have you with me and me with you tonight. It's been a beautiful day, and I'm hoping that you're already out on the trails in your area. So this topic, Janet and I were thinking about topics long ago for these, and so this is the burning questions one, and about new approaches, things that have worked. So this is what we're going to cover. So I'd like to know a little bit more about your board successes and any questions that you've thought about before tonight. I'll just touch base on some common board challenges that may not be yours, but just to kind of get us thinking. And I have four practical ideas that are new to this series for you to try. One about meetings, maybe not so much, but I've got another take on that. And I will end with a slide about striving for board to work more strategically, and I'll explain that when we get to it. So anyway, those are the themes tonight, and let's see if what things you might have to offer about to get us going through the topic. So here's a couple of pieces, and I'll take notes, especially with the first one. So we could just go around. There's only three of you that are new to this. So what I like about my board, it is what it is. What do you like about them? And then this one here maybe will get you thinking what I would change about my board would be. So we've got Danielle, Dale, and Michelle. So one question, one topic, what I like about my board and what I would change about my board.
I can start, Dale or Grant.
Okay.
Yeah. For me, what I like about my board is we've worked a long time together, and that's a good thing and a bad thing. We can almost we know what each person's abilities are in terms of their trail knowledge and looking at what they can do on the trail versus what needs to be done like paperwork wise, which is great.
Yeah.
The thing that I would change about my board though would be I need new blood. So that's
Okay.
and we actually want to mentor new people coming in. We've been doing this for a long time, and we need to share our knowledge with a younger crowd.
Okay. Anything else you'd change? Maybe not.
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe there's some other ideas, but thanks, Danielle. I'm just making a list here. So let's see what Dale might say about these two. What I like about my board, what I might change about it.
Okay, well, good evening. What I like about our board is we've been fortunate recently in attracting a small number of new board members, which has been great. We're still struggling to fill positions. We've had to leave a few open, and we've kind of removed a couple of positions as well, just because of the administrative burden of trying to maintain something that we don't seem to be able to fill. So that attracting them, I'm actually looking forward to the the session on volunteering and attracting and retaining volunteers. I think that will play well into the board side of it as well. What I'd like to change about the board, in addition to everything else, we've got some really enthusiastic members. We've got some people that put in a tremendous amount of work, more than they should, really. and they're carrying the lion's share, and that unfortunately creates some burnout. We've had a couple that have decided to opt out, uh, largely due to the amount of demands on their time. What I would change about our board is general accessibility, trying to make it more, I guess, digestible. And your comments earlier about the policies, the guidebook, and so forth. We really are at 80 pages, and we're working on reducing that now. I've taken some of your ideas about policies and bylaws and trying to maybe even create two booklets with a referral back and forth between the two, just to simplify that. That's a bit of an issue, I think, with people looking at joining and they see this huge document and they're kind of intimidated by it. So that's probably the big thing right now. We're also working on some exit steps. So as people are retiring from the board, kind of a checklist of things to do that need to be done, changing email addresses, passwords, accounts, that sort of thing, so that we've got a more transparent and easier to manage method of people either onboarding or exiting. And so that it just kind of revolves around some a fair number of changes that we're kind of concurrently working on right now that we're hoping is going to result in a board that's a little bit more easier to approach and a little less intimidating from anyone that might be interested in taking on even a small role in it.
Okay, that's good, Dale. And we might come back to your successes in recruiting some new board members. That's also a topic, as you mentioned, coming up in this series. So thanks. Michelle?
Hi, I don't sit on a trail board, but I do sit on 3 provincial recreation organization boards. So what I do like about that is I'm always learning new things on one board that I can share to another one, which is really great. And board members that have been around for a long while, they're like the knowledge keepers that pass things, why we do certain things, and that really helps. It's great when you do get new people in, but I do sit on one board that unfortunately it's pretty much all new. So you have to go, luckily, I mean, even though we have policies and things, not everybody reads it. So sometimes you have to speak up and explain why you do things a certain way, especially if the board is all new. And unfortunately, one of those boards only is at half capacity right now. I do really appreciate Janet's role in support and some of the other coordinators we have on the other boards. That really helps prevent some of the volunteer burnout because there is a lot of paperwork involved. So I do appreciate that a lot.
Okay, Michelle. So just think, you're sitting on 3 boards, and just so thinking about those with these questions in mind, without actually naming the group, if you've got 3, what would you change about each one? Like what this board X, I would change this, board Y, I would change that, board Z, I would change something else. Any thoughts?
To be honest, I've sat on one of the boards for 25 years, and I feel in the past we had less paperwork and we just did more action. We just did things and it was funner. And I don't know if it's just the paperwork side of thing gets us bogged down a bit.
I mean, there's not as much paperwork or too much?
I think there's too much now, just in comparison to in the past where we did a lot more fun activities and just hands-on and did things. There was more community involvement, but I think now and I understand why we have the paperwork side of things, but yeah. I think for people new that aren't familiar with it, that could be a deterrent.
Okay, and that sort of goes to Dale's point about his board being a little intimidating given the amount of documents that our board members are expected to be familiar with. So good. All right, so that's my first foray into seeing what I can get from you that we can talk about later. I want to try something else. So this series, both these ones that I'm involved with and the others are about getting your board to try some new things. So I'm wondering if might have an example or two among the 3 of you So something your board has tried to do differently that's been successful, something that you tried but it didn't take for whatever reason, or something you've heard about from other groups. So we'll go right back to Danielle.
Okay.
Yep.
So one thing we had to try, and this is because we were during a pandemic, and I think this is one of the successes of that, was we used to meet face to face regularly every month. Um, and, a lot of us had to travel a fair distance, especially after work, and try to get to the meetings and stuff. So we decided to move to a virtual platform. And so everybody uh, learned how to do a virtual meeting together. Took a little bit. And we are still maintaining that virtual connection because we find that there's less time traveling to one location to meet face to face. And it gives us more people at the table than before.
Are you
So that,
doing all the meetings virtually
except for our annual meeting.
except for annual meeting?
Yeah. Yeah.
And you probably wouldn't go back to a mixed meeting. You've been successful, and so it's working for you. You're gonna
Yes,
stick with
because
it.
we have a lot of members that we used to meet in Yarmouth, but
Yep.
Yarmouth County itself is a fair distance, like between, let's say, for example, Pubnico and Yarmouth, it's almost 30-minute drive on the highway.
Yep.
So those members, it's a deterrent to actually go and meet, especially in the wintertime or in the summertime or whatever. It takes a lot of time to out of your own when you're meeting for an hour and then you have to drive an hour.
Okay. Yep. Well, it's good. You've been successful with that, and have adopted it as your go-to practice. Good.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. Um,
Anything
Go ahead.
anything else?
In terms of unsuccessful, um, we've tried to mentor some people into the board roles. And then they just throw up their hands and they say, this is too much work. And they go off. Um, and because they're more of like, I think to take Michelle's point, they're more action driven as opposed to sit down and discuss.
Yeah.
So, we tried to make it as simple as possible, but with all the reporting that has to happen because we're using government funds, that's a little bit there's a lot of responsibility and they didn't want that anyway. So that was, but I think that's more trying to communicate the role and maybe a shared, um, maybe a shared role in taking, maybe make it more bite size as opposed to a big, large portfolio.
What's an interesting comment? I've heard it in other contexts that people look at the board and they tend to be very action oriented. They'd rather be out doing something tangible that has a beginning and an end than sitting behind a desk with others talking about more abstract things. So that's definitely a topic that could be covered on its own, and maybe will get addressed a little bit in the upcoming session on recruiting volunteers. But knowing what volunteers are interested in, may be
Mm.
interested in your trail, but they may not be interested in sitting on a board. But we can certainly talk about the difference between how you might mentor somebody who's more inclined to want to be action oriented. Thank you. Anything, so just in terms of, these are just prompts for questions, but things you've noticed about other groups or know about other groups, or things that you might be curious about that we could touch on tonight?
For me,
Yeah.
what other questions do I have? Um, so we had homework for last meeting, right?
Yep.
In terms of position descriptions. So I floated that idea and put a straw dog out there at our meeting this Monday for people to digest, and we're going to have a discussion in May. So
That's good.
That's what I'm trying.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm curious about how that's going to work out.
Well, let's made a note here. Maybe we'll come back to it. I've got a slide further on that might allow us to touch base on that matter. All right. Thank you very much. So, Michelle, anything here that
Um,
generate some thoughts, experiences?
Well, successfully, I really do like that Hike Nova Scotia. We have a couple in-person meetings, but where our gas mileage is covered for that, because that could be a huge expense to people traveling if that wasn't reimbursed. So that's a nice balance from the virtual to the in-person, because I think it is important to have that as well. Um, let me see. Um, I sit on another board, and even though we keep talking about like you have different board positions, and then you could be the head of these different committees, unfortunately, we just never get the committees going, even though we'll have social posts and try to recruit or invite people. So, like for a contest committee on one board, it just ends up falling back to the board and doing all the work. To the point it questioned even if we'll run them or not. So unsuccessfully there, even though an ideal situation was be if we had those people in the committees sharing the workload. Unfortunately, a lot of it does fall on the board members.
Yeah.
Questions do I have? I have to think about that one.
Okay. So before we move on, just are there any things you would be curious about or have heard about that other boards have tried to do? Any if you think beyond your own boards, your own board. Maybe not?
I know that like some boards, especially that are getting worn thin, that might not have a coordinator. Like Cross Country Nova Scotia, we relied on, I think it was Sports Nova Scotia, to help with some of that paperwork and admin side of things.
Yeah. All right, just looking at my notes here. So I'm glad there are things you like about your boards, even things that are about the board has a lot of experience and we work really well together. In terms of things we might talk about later on tonight, about why do things always go back to the board, to fall back on the board because groups aren't elements, committees might not be doing everything they need to be. Making board membership, enjoying the board less intimidating is another thing, and about mentoring people, it's just kind of tied to that. But I'm glad that you're having successes amongst the three of you with virtual meetings as well as in-person meetings. So that's really good. All right, we maybe have some other things will come up. Um, so here are some things that in probably your travels, and certainly mine, that boards often report, and I'm not suggesting any of these are true in your cases, but often, I mean, this is a pretty common list. We not get through the agenda. Somebody around the board table takes up too much airtime. We have board members consistently that don't show up. Committees are not doing their jobs or not, again, as already been mentioned, things are falling, the work actually falls back to the board at some point. Board members come unprepared. I don't know if that's a factor in your board lives. Members sometimes just show up at the meeting and expect that they wouldn't have had to do a single bit of thinking before the meeting. I know this next one is one that you're experiencing. We have few young or new people on the board, but I think that Dale said that they've got some new people on their board and it's working out. And I think I've mentioned this before, but often we're not able to make quorum. So I don't know that any one of those is of concern for your boards. If not, you should be smiling. Anything there that you want me to talk about even briefly?
Grant, hi,
Yeah.
this is Danielle. Um, we don't have a problem getting through the agenda. That's generally not a problem.
Good.
And the chair takes care of the airtime if somebody is over talking, which is great. Um, committees, our board doesn't have a lot of committees. And I don't know if that's a right thing or a wrong thing because we're such a small group. It's like we have those action members that are out there on the trail working, and then we have the people that show up for the monthly meeting, and that's generally the board. So is that a wrong thing?
No, it's definitely not a wrong thing, Daniel. I think I said in one of the earlier two sessions that often work is best done by just one or person or two. And so if you don't need to set up committees to do a lot of the things, then I would suggest you don't do it.
Okay.
Yep, definitely not a wrong thing. If things are working on that front, that's fine.
Yeah. So
I'm curious
it.
about in your situations, whether you expect board members to come to meetings having done some preparation, and do you send out materials for them to look at, or do they know enough about the agenda that they arrive having given some thought to something or having read something?
So yeah, if we have I know you guys are, I think it was in the first under chairing, we have a standard agenda that doesn't typically change. So they know what everybody's to talk about and look
Yes.
at on the trail when we're monitoring the trail. So that's pretty standard. And so during the month between the meetings, those are the items that they're always looking for. So we have a lot of beaver activity, for example. And so everybody is sort of assigned a beaver area
Okay.
to see what kind of damage they've done.
Yeah.
Anyway, they're good to eat. But anyway, that's fine. So they do come prepared, or what we use oftentimes is a chat group on Messenger, and we post pictures of problems so that people are informed throughout the month what problems are arising, and then it doesn't become a long drawn out conversation at the meeting to make decisions about them. So that is kind of homework in between. So I feel the board members are coming to the meeting prepared.
Oh, good. And
Yeah.
I'm interested in your messenger chat group. I don't know if any of the rest of you use that. I'm on a board in my neighborhood that's our main vehicle for communication between meetings is our little chat group. And it is quite good. It seems like not everybody can participate in every chat, every issue that's brought up, but it really does keep people informed. So I don't know any other um, luck with those from Danielle or Dale. I mean, or sorry, that anyone else using a chat between meetings?
We have a couple of chat groups that we use, which are quite handy even in last minute prep for the meetings, and also just keeping up on certain projects that are in process among different groups. So we've got a couple of people responsible for different regional areas that kind of keep us in the loop. Something we did, we just finished our AGM, first time it's actually been on time, or relatively close to being on time. We did it entirely virtually with voting, and that worked actually really well. And we had much better turnout than we typically have due to the fact people didn't have to be in a particular place and travel and so forth, because we also have people that are from all areas of the province that have some obstacles to getting to a location. So we were actually really happy with that. The voting had a couple of glitches. We had to recast one of the votes just because a couple of people weren't registering for some reason. But once the kinks were worked out, it worked really well. And there was very positive feedback at the end. Everyone felt their time was better spent.
Well, that's good. Good, Dale. Thank you. Well, just I want
Only
to go
thing I could
back.
add to that, when I sit on one board and they only send the minutes out sometime right before the meeting, or they forget to the minutes and on the agenda to vote for the minutes. It's like never ready. Nobody's had a chance to review them.
That's Danielle, is that group still doing that?
That's one board I sit on.
Well, that group and I would be I mean, you probably know this, well advised to send the minutes out as soon after the meeting as possible, especially when, they have action items. So,
Yeah, I think unfortunately sometimes our secretary, we don't always get that position filled either. We start using AI a little bit too. But yeah, unfortunately it doesn't always get sent out.
a shortcut to that is if the minutes aren't ready in time to send out so that people can act on them, then maybe just a list of actions also could go out instead.
Oh yeah, I like that idea. Just a simple form of action items right away.
Yeah. Like what's the item, who's responsible, or what is something easy to prepare and easy to send out, and then you can take your time with the minutes for approval at the next meeting.
Yeah, I like that idea. Otherwise the month goes by fast.
Yeah, it does go by fast. All right. So some things here on my notepad we can return to, but I'm going to walk you through. I have like 4 ideas that you might think about adopting, and then maybe we can chat a bit about helping your board to work more strategically, and I'll explain that. So my first and one of my favorite ideas is to create a board calendar or annual work plan for the board. It may not have everything to do with the work of the trail, and you may have a strategic plan or a plan for the trail as well. But a board calendar, and I'll show you an example, is a way of kind of mapping out what the year ahead is going to look like and giving a board a sense of the rhythm of their work, so that and if you could, and it's an attempt to really get away from every meeting being the same, which I hear at least one of you use the same agenda. So this is an alternative to that. But the idea is that uh, every month there might be something every meeting you might want to have some of the same items. But maybe there are some items that the board has to remember or work on throughout the course of the year, and you don't want to lose track of those. So this is my list of some of the things that don't need to be discussed every month, but do need to be talked about and maybe acted on over the course of a board's work year. So those are the list I've got. Planning the annual general meeting, reviewing the bylaws, maybe not every year, maybe evaluating a meeting or two, see whether everybody's happy with kind of work that gets done around the board table. But there may be and you might not have a longer list than this, but there are things the board has to pay attention to throughout the course of the year. And one way of depicting that is kind of to get advance the idea of having dates, just having dates for meetings, to having something that looks more like this. And I like the visual aspect of it, but it's an attempt to sort of say, what are the things we want to do every meeting, and what are the things that we need to pay attention to sometime during the year, and when should we do that? So it's easy a calendar to create, and would of course have has the dates of the meetings on it, but it also might have other things that you want to make sure get looked at over the course of the year. And then you use that as your guide to planning the meetings. So then if you have most of the things listed in your calendar, then that helps consider what's going to be on the agenda for each meeting. So it could be much more involved than this, but again, my favor, you might not. The idea of creating a bunch of boxes which give a sense of the year rather than a list, of each month. But a list of each month, some groups also like. But the exercise starts with saying, what are the things the board needs to pay attention to over the course of a year? looking ahead, and when are we going to look at that? So anyway, I think it's an easy innovation. Certainly, if you're recruiting new board members, it gives a sense of what's ahead. So it's really my way of saying, let's keep track of the things we have to do. Let's not do everything the same every month, which to me has an advantage. It may also have some drawbacks from what I've already heard tonight. What do you think? Does this idea resonate at all? Having a bit of a plan for the board's work?
Hi, Grant. I'll start.
Sure.
So we do a calendar already, and I guess that's part of the standardness of the agenda. It's always down on the bottom of the agenda as
Okay.
to so that people can sort of if they can we have our AGM in June because that's after fishing season finishes, and then we can have more public engagement. That just seems to work for us. So we have that calendar sort of always on the bottom, as well as a parking lot for those. They're not like a discussion item every time, but it's a parking lot of an idea that might have come up in a discussion and say somebody says, can we put that to the parking lot? And so I keep it there or somebody keeps it there so that we don't forget that idea. And then when it comes time that we have to fill some space, then we can hash it out a little bit more.
That's a very good idea. I've heard the idea before, especially about people having a more than just the agenda for the meeting on their agenda sheet. So I think that's what you're saying, and having a parking lot which continues from meeting to meeting, if that's what you're doing. I think that's a great idea. So that you don't lose track and you kind of do know from what's at the bottom of the agenda of what lies ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, very good. Dale, any suggestion whether that's something you might do or do with your board agendas?
Well, we try to be honest. We're not very successful. So I like the idea, particularly when it comes to some of the major milestones that we kind of forget are coming up, and then you realize, oh crap, it's a week away, and you try to scramble to have it done. So yeah, I like that idea, and I think that's something that we definitely should implement. The issue we have is setting specific dates, but I'm just kind of looking at this and thinking, okay, so if our meeting, we often have difficulty getting everybody on board for a particular meeting date, but we can just, put the month of June and say TBD on the date, but here are the milestones that need to be achieved. And yeah, I think that'd be quite useful as a quick reference.
That's a good idea. I mean, that's a similar idea, but an idea like that, like the term milestone. So yes, maybe not committing to a certain meeting date, but keeping track of the things that you don't want to have them come up with only a few weeks to go. So
Yeah, and then yeah, exactly, to be aware of what's coming up because we often lose track, and I'm terrible. I'm probably one of the worst offenders in our group for not keeping tabs on dates. Just a quick question as well. I don't know if we're going to have a little extra time, but if you had a moment at some point to maybe flesh out, I'm still a bit vague on bylaws versus policies. From what I can see, they're really not different. It's just one is registered with, we have to literally register the bylaws where the policies are much more flexible. But at some point during this meeting, if you had maybe a couple minutes to kind of expand on that a bit as well, and some ideas you might have.
I'm happy to do that, Dale. Thanks. Any other thoughts about this idea of a calendar or setting up some milestones and having a parking lot as well, which is different because it's tied to ideas you don't want to have disappear? Those are good ideas. Something, and so when people see their agenda in front of them, they also see more than that. They kind of know what lies ahead, and you don't want to lose track of things that people have suggested. Very good ideas.
Grant, we also do a meeting every third Monday of the month.
Yep.
So we already have our dates set.
Okay. Well, if you're using this scheme, whether it was a series of a table or whether it was a list, then this idea would be to put on those dates, add to those dates the things that you want to do at that meeting. I'm certainly in favor of regular meeting dates, but not all groups are able to do that. Anyway, this is my board calendar idea. On my website, there's a guide for putting it out. It's only 2 pages. It says the same kind of thing. It uses a similar, maybe more involved example. I would add in this case that I've put on this calendar, and would suggest if you have a calendar, put on some events that also that your group maybe that are actually relevant to your group or your group is sponsoring. So if you have an open house or a public event, if you have something social, a board or member potluck, putting those things on it too also helps give a broader view of the work of the board. All right, moving on from my board calendar idea. Now, I've said this at least once before in each of the meetings, each of the webinars we had. I remain a big fan of trying to have meeting agendas that are different from one meeting to the next. And my idea here is to try to, and I'll come back to it again, is trying to keep the board interested, encourage some preparation because things are not always the same every meeting, and to be a little more, again, I'll be repeating myself, a little more strategic in what the board looks at every time it meets. So could have if a standard agenda works for you, then I wouldn't give it up. But if you haven't given much thought to the agendas, or they are agendas that are standard because they just involve not much advanced planning, then maybe you might want to think about mixing up your agendas. So anyway, this is just an example. Board calendar idea it feeds nicely into changing meeting agendas. The board I sit on, which is the Ecology Action Center here in Halifax, only meets quarterly, but each of those quarterly meetings are on a particular theme. So, but it's not a trails group and doesn't have, and we can easily organize ourselves around more major themes like outcomes and human resources and finances. But anyway, each meeting we don't cover everything in each meeting. We just kind of focus on the themes. Anyway, that would be my second suggestion. And again, if you haven't tried changing your agendas, maybe you would give it a try. See whether if a board in one meeting has a somewhat different kind of agenda, different things on it. Give it a try and then and then assess it. Well, how did that go? Is it better? Is this a better approach? And I guess the other thing I would add is that having different agenda items every month means that somebody has to think about the meeting in advance, prepare for the meeting, and I think that's a good thing. So that meetings tend to be much more dynamic if somebody's done some work in advance. Any thoughts on changing your agendas, Michelle or Danielle? Danielle, you have the standard ones, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So you think your board will stick with that?
Most likely, yes.
Okay, that's good.
But we do have some changes in terms of the little calendar that's on, in terms of the cycle of the committees. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. Okay. So maybe you'll get some traction somewhere, maybe not. Now, this was the topic of our first webinar in the Improving Boards series. And I'm going to come back to it because I think it's something I really believe in, and that is trying to raise up your meeting leadership. Now, maybe you've got a chair that is able to manage the meetings really, really well, and ensure that you get through the agendas. But if you don't, or maybe this is really the point, if you're trying to find somebody to take on the job of being chair, I like the idea of before someone takes it on to have a discussion of what you want from a board lead or chair. Their balance of trying to make sure you get through the agenda and giving everybody a chance to speak versus doing some planning for the meeting. So I would recommend that if you're recruiting a chair from the existing board who wants to volunteer, that you first have a discussion of what you expect. And the question already came up about position descriptions. So having a written position description, I think, helps as an output of that kind of discussion. And having a position description that you've got from somebody at some other place to put before the board is often more often a kind of a easier way of approaching position descriptions than expecting people to come up with one from scratch. So meeting leadership, I think across the nonprofit sector is something that can be easily improved upon if it's talked about a little bit more. The other thing I would add is that finding a chair, recruiting a chair, helps if that person understands that it's not always up to them to do everything. So having a compatriot or some other person on their side to help plan the meetings. Often the secretary is a good choice. Vice chair can be too, but just having one person to run some ideas by really helps in terms of the meeting management. And also means the chair is not off on their own, worrying and taking on all of the other responsibility. So again, this is meeting leadership is something that I believe could be more easily addressed with a fairly safe kind of conversation, especially in the context of asking somebody who might want to be considering volunteering to take on that role, what they see the chair's role might be, and what other members of the board might think are important matters for the chair to pay attention to as they're running meetings and preparing for meetings. So do either any of the three of you, Dale or Michelle or Danielle, have any thoughts about what they might do, or if there's anything to be done in terms of improving meeting leadership?
I have a tendency to chair the meetings, even though
Yes.
I'm not the president, but I have the capabilities of the technology. So, because we do Zoom meetings,
Yeah.
and my members are a little older, and not that they're not able to do it, it's just they don't have the capability on their computer to do it. So so they're able to connect through their phone, or it's small, or what have you. So it's easier for me to set up meetings and send it out and chair, because then I can troubleshoot the technology a lot easier than somebody else. Does that
So
make sense?
do you, Danielle, review the meetings with your president?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So we usually have a call, maybe sometimes a week ahead of time,
Yeah.
or a chat on our chat group, not just between the two of us, and we set the agenda and just sort of look at the things or the issues that need to be discussed, and how we plan on sort of approaching it, or what have you. But yeah, that's just a little conversation a week before the meeting. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if that's working, that's really good. somebody might say, well, what happens if you're not there, not able to run the meeting? Um, is the organization a little bit too dependent? But at the moment that that's working, then as long as I think that the president is involved in thinking through the meetings, then I think that's a good step. I certainly there I have come across situations where the chair just arrives at a meeting and is presented with the agenda and don't really do much except raise the agenda items as they get done. So
Yeah. No, I was sick one time.
yeah,
And like all of a sudden, so I couldn't attend the meeting. But I had the Zoom link meeting sent out, they had done it a few more times, which was great. And they made me proud.
all right. Well, I'm glad you're able to say that. That's good that the board is you know, somewhat self-sufficient in being able to manage itself.
Yes.
Yeah, fantastic. Dale, any other thoughts? Any thoughts you would add to this? I know we've covered it before.
Not a lot. We're going from one chair to a new chair, and I think the consensus among the group is we'd like to be a little bit more interactive than we have been in the past. And that's not a criticism of anyone. It's just that as the board has evolved, it really did require kind of some pretty assertive management just to keep things running smoothly. We've reached a point now where I think the role would be better served with a little bit more interaction, a little bit more encouragement of even during the meetings. And I think that's going to happen. It's just it's when you're dealing with people, whether it's in a voluntary position or as managers, it's always very difficult. You have to be very careful about how you go about that. So that's kind of a work in process with us right now. But we're hoping that we're going to have a bit more of an open forum going forward.
Dale, will that happen without a conversation about that's what you want to do?
Well, it's a moment of opportunity because we do have the roles changing, and
Yeah,
and including the new chair is openly stated she would like to see a bit more interaction, and
yeah.
I think the group's pretty much in agreement. It's just a question of how you go about that, right?
Yeah.
And
Well,
she doesn't have a huge amount of experience managing.
no.
She's very, very bright, very motivated, very capable, but it's
Yeah,
more the background and the confidence, I think, that might be
yeah.
an opportunity.
Well, I think those kinds of transitions do make for an opportunity for a conversation, and if that's one of her goals, then one like a person like her could say, I would like to have meetings more interactive, and I wonder, I'm not always sure how to do that. Does anyone have any suggestions? So I guess I'm pushing here for making taking advantage of some of changes in going on the board for at least a little bit more conversation and a little more transparency around things that don't automatically are not automatically done well. Anyway, that's
Yeah, no, that's pretty much spot on. It's just is trying to, it's a difficult thing to do. Some people more naturally than others, where you can sit down and suddenly everyone's just kind of naturally participating, and yet you can have a different situation where everyone kind of not really sure what their
yeah,
role might be. So it's that welcoming nature, I think, that really kind of drives that.
yeah. Okay, thank you. This third idea. So my fourth idea. So this is one I thought I'd float out there tonight. Um, just the idea of inviting outside guests to your meetings. So that kind of suggests maybe some change, maybe in looking at what's on your agenda throughout the year. But maybe there's one or two meetings a year where somebody, and I'm going to look for you to think about some ideas of who, but somebody maybe from another trails group or from the municipality or from from a different organization coming to a meeting to do maybe a short 10-minute presentation or 15-minute presentation so if they get to, you get to some outside, outside perspectives, and that the person coming in also becomes more aware of what you do and more appreciative of your trails group. So has anyone had any experience with an outside guest, and has that worked out well? Hmm.
We haven't had any outside guests in a long time. But that's a great idea to try to build community for sure.
Well, again, it's something that a group could consider. They're looking at the year ahead. Who might we invite to a meeting? You know, can we suspend some of our regular meeting work if we meet monthly? Particularly, can we suspend some of our regular meeting tasks and have somebody come in and talk with us for a while and ask questions and have a cup of coffee and some squares. So it's just something to think about. I think it helps boards think outside of their own group sometimes, and it certainly can help build a little bit of greater awareness in your community. So, and often, if your board meetings are not, it can make for a more interesting year of board meetings to have at least one with somebody coming in from outside. I think it's easier to do if you were meeting monthly, and there may be months in their trails calendar that are more amenable to having an outside guest than others because of the work that's on your plate.
Sometimes we'll have someone that wants to present something with a request from the board.
Sorry, would you repeat that?
Oh, sometimes we'll have someone that wants to present something to the board, and then they make a request, like they'll have an idea they want something they want to do, and then a request from the board, whether it be support or funding.
Okay. So somebody from outside who makes a request to come to the board. Is that what you mean?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think that's good too. And I think that having the board think about who might be an interesting person to hear from, who's got some common work interests to what we're trying to do. A sister organization that maybe is not a trails group, a recreation director from a municipality, those are kind of things. So the idea of thinking about who might make for an interesting meeting, could we invite? Well, I would add that to the ideas of somebody saying we'd like to come and make a presentation. So I'll just throw that out. Inviting some outside guests to your meetings is my fourth idea. All right. So moving on from 4 ideas. So they were the board calendar, the guests at meetings, changing up your meeting agendas, and trying to build greater capacity in the board's leaderships. Were the 4 ones. And this one, to kind of wrap up the main topics I have considered looking at, is to try to work more strategically. And I don't know what that means for you, the 3 of you. I don't know whether your boards, your trail group have strategic plans. I don't know if they're essential to have them. If you've got them, I think they're fantastic. But I do think that boards can benefit from having goals as they move throughout the year. And these are my suggested areas. There could be 4 goals. So these are what I've suggested. The goals might emerge or might already be present from a strategic plan. And if you have goals and reminded about them, I mean, it's already been said that having some things at the bottom of the agenda, parking lot items or milestones, without trying to have too much on the agenda sheet, could also have some goals on them. So let's go back to the agenda one. You'll see that I put in here annual goals. 1, write a goal 2. If you have some goals for the organization, for the trail, you could consider having one of those as an agenda item each time you meet. So, anyone have any experience with having goal discussions at their meetings?
We have a strategic plan that we review every year that has goals, and it's um, I I liken it to our work plan actually,
Okay.
but it's something that we have as a living document that we look at to help inform our work on the trail.
Okay, and do you look at it, do you look at any of the goals on a regular basis or just once a year?
We evaluate them once a year, um, and then we look at, okay, is this goal still active? Do we need to create a different goal? Is it measurable? Going um, from from our plan, because we might have, like, for example, right now we're really have a main focus on bridge work because we have 17 bridges that we need to fix
Yep.
in a very short period of time. But that's part of the work plan. But that's been a multi-year goal for us because it's going to take a lot of financial maneuvering for that. But it's something that we look at every year, and it's on our calendar to do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Daniel, what about the idea of having one of those strategic goals be a topic for every other meeting?
It certainly would spread out the discussion over a longer period of time,
Yeah.
as well as perhaps more robust discussion as to whether or not we've met that goal or not, and why not. So that, and then how do we change that? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's my suggestion, that I think that groups generally benefit from having a sense of what the goals are of their strategic plan. It may make sense, at least I certainly may think it makes sense to try to put one or two of those goals on the agenda. And if you have your board calendar, again, which I'm trying to sell big time, having a goal, every other month, we're looking at one of our goal areas, how we're making out. Does it still make sense? And what's it going to take to make more progress on it? So again, it's another way of making the agenda maybe a little more dynamic. Other experience with putting strategic goals, keeping them in front of your board?
Actually, our group's quite accomplished at that. Part of the reason is the necessity for some of the funding applications. We have to have an annual and a long-term goal, and that's something we do review, and it's very useful because it's funny how things can slip off the table if they're ignored for a period of time. So we'll periodically, probably every 2 or 3 months, I'll have a quick review of where we're at on certain ones. Where two of our particular ones are, we're trying to grow the women in moto section and attract more women to the sport, which has been quite successful through some extended focus. And the other one is adding ride parks. And at our last meeting, we actually had a bit of a discussion about it, realized there were some unfinished tasks that hadn't been addressed as a result of that review. So yeah, it definitely helps to keep things focused and moving forward.
Okay, thanks, Bill. So those are my 4 suggestions and my pitch to try to find ways for your boards to work more strategically, to try to keep some goals in front of them, keep them in front of the board, either by putting them on your agenda or putting them in your work plan for the year. I think are also good things. I just had a little, that last thought on this slide is just having some goals can also help with board recruiting. so that the focus of the recruitment is not on all of the things that are expected as a board member, but just a sense of the long-term picture for the organization. It can be a real motivator for getting people to volunteer and to join a board, in my opinion. So those are the main things. I don't know if anyone has thought of I'm going to address Dale's question in a minute about difference between policies and bylaws. The ideas that came up, which I like and which I'm hoping that the three of you, the three organizations present tonight will think about, is just having an agendas that are different, having maybe a parking lot. I really like the idea on the agenda, so ideas aren't lost. Making sure the board aware of what their milestones are over the course of the year. Trying to find ways, and I know Dale is doing this, a lot of this is trying to make their organization a little more accessible by cutting down on the amount of paperwork, packaging it up somewhat different. I think this is really good, so board members aren't so intimidated. The issue that was raised about people coming to board who are action oriented versus sort of more governance or happy with more abstract kind of work, I think is something that will go into mentoring roles and it's certainly a topic for the session, I hope, on that could be raised at the session on recruitment. Anyone have any other questions or things that they would like to try to do following up from tonight? All right.
For myself, I think I'll take the idea of inviting guests.
Okay.
Not at every meeting, but certainly maybe during the winter time when we're not so much in the construction phase of things, for sure.
I think you'll enjoy it. Inviting guests. I have a post from long ago on my website, which is about guests in the boardroom. I think if you Google guests in the boardroom, you'd find it. But give some of the rationale and some of the things to pay attention to on that topic. How much do you ask them to make a presentation? Do you give them a gift? Those kinds of things.
Right.
So yeah, and I definitely would not try it every meeting. I think, and if the board has some suggestions, that might be good to do. We had a couple of potential candidates to be guests. Thank you. Anything else?
Grant,
Well, yes.
just on the idea of similar to the idea of bringing people in for a presentation, I'm wondering what your thoughts are about doing some learning as a board together, as mixing up your meetings so that maybe there's one board meeting where you take a half hour and you learn something about diversity, equity, inclusion, or you learn something about how to do a certain thing a board should be doing. You know what I mean? Like, do you have any thoughts around that?
Well, I think that obviously it's always a good idea to have some learning times built into the board's work over the course of the year on topics like you suggested, and that may involve inviting somebody in to talk to the board about those things. And so I think there's a training element or is always helps makes the dynamics of board work much more interesting. So I would certainly count that in. But I also like the idea of a board sort of reaching out and thinking about their wider community. And so those ideas might easily get married together, but thinking about so I think that would be another way of mixing up board meetings and keeping interest, is inviting people in to do some board development. Thanks, Janet.
Yeah, thanks.
So I'm just going to, Dale had raised the question and it's about the difference between bylaws and policies. So, so let's address that in a minute. It only take a couple of minutes. So The bylaws, as Dale said, are things that you have to, are part of your registration process with the Registry of Joint Stock. So organizations have to have a memorandum of association which outlines their objects, and they have to have bylaws, and the bylaws uh, um, are really the formal aspect of the organization's incorporation. So they're legally binding on the organization, and they can't really be changed unless they're changed at an annual general meeting with a special resolution of the membership. Uh, Typically, the bylaws from one organization to the next are fairly similar, except maybe in the size of the board or who are constituted members or what quorums are for meetings. So they don't differ much from one organization to the next. Policies, on the other hand, are things that the board decides that it needs to document or put down on paper as a guide for them now and for those who will replace them in the future. So policies and I think we had a slide from the previous session that listed some of the areas of policies, but the advantage of policies is that they can be changed at any time or improved upon. And I would always say to boards that you should review policies once in a while, but when questions come up at a board meeting and you say, well, what have we done before? And someone says, well, 2 years ago we did this, and somebody else might ask, well, is there a policy on that? And somebody will say no, or maybe there isn't. The question would be, should you have one? And there's some policies for nonprofit groups, especially all volunteer groups, are often fairly few. There's only need to be a few. So board member position descriptions, which we've already discussed here in earlier sessions, is certainly one area for policies. So a financial management policy, code of conduct, conflict of interest. Those are and then some that might relate directly to trails. So I don't know that, Dale, that if you have other questions about it, but there are policies are those things which provide more details than the bylaws are intended to do about how the organization will run over the course of a year and what are things that are the principles of its operation that go beyond what minimal things are in the bylaws. Bylaws, in my opinion, should be kept pretty minimal. But a lot of the important kinds of discussions a group will have and guidelines that they want to try to follow and things they aspire to doing are better handled in policies. And you might go ahead.
That's great. That summarizes a few of the questions I have.
Yeah.
So we pulled the Registry of Joint Stocks just to see what we actually officially have on file as bylaws.
Yeah.
When you're doing a booklet or a summary, is it wise to list the bylaws and end the policies, or because right now ours is kind of intermingled and we're not really sure which is a bylaw and which is a policy, or at least in some cases.
I think they should be kept completely separate.
Okay.
I think the bylaw should be a standalone document, and I can't think of too many, other than maybe some details of positions, like the role of the chair might be more spelled out in policies and in the bylaws. But I think I think they should be not intermingled. That would be my suggestion.
Okay. Yeah, I was kind of thinking about maybe taking the 80 pages and dividing it, just keep it as one document, but dividing it into chapters so that there's an individual. I'm just because I will be doing this and someone else will be taking over. My term ends at the end of this year. And on our shared drive, we've got so many documents anyway, it's easy to lose track. I'm not sure what the most effective way is to tackle that. I just really don't want things going missing. Frankly, it took a couple hours of searching to even find the most current versions of various things when we're going through it.
Yeah, you're not alone in having that problem, but I think once you solve it, then you're good for the long term. But
yeah, getting those guideposts in is kind of important.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, and it's so policies can be changed with board approval.
Yeah.
Obviously needs to be logged in the minutes and that sort of thing.
Yep.
And the bylaws, that basically needs to be approved by the membership. So that would almost, like, as you mentioned, that would be kind of an AGM process.
That's right. And I
Okay.
think at a policy approved by the board at a meeting would mean that not only does it have to be minuted, but that the policy that's created has to be put somewhere. So then that suggests a policy manual, which is what you're, I think, talking about in terms of your documents you already have.
Yeah,
So
and
policies
we've got
don't live in the minutes.
right. Yeah, that's the issue. We have some policies now that we're not sure which version was ever approved. So we're just
Yeah,
gonna, that's part of my role is to summarize the ones that we're not certain about, then bring them back and
yeah,
actually either revote or vote probably for the first time on them.
right.
So,
And
okay.
putting an approval date on each policy is a good idea,
Yes.
so that you know where, when was the last, or approval date, then will tell you when it was when it was approved and when it might need to be looked at again.
Yeah, we're very good in some areas on that. In other areas, it appears that I think at the further back we go, the less likely that is to have occurred.
Right. And I would just add here, before we wrap up, Dale, that I think there are different categories of policies. So there are policies that apply to the board only, like conflict of interest generally, or board chair job position description. And then there are, if the organization has staff, and there may be policies that are really more the purview of staff.
Okay,
So
yeah, good point. Right, okay.
yeah. So if you had a reimbursement of expense policy, for instance, that would be more of an operational policy, and really the board would want to know if there is one, but may not need to approve it.
Okay.
So, but that sort of means sorting out what things really you want the board to. If the board has its hands in everything, then it's not going to be able to do some of its larger thinking. So trying to separate that kind of may be helpful.
Yeah, well, what I'm planning on doing is started doing is bite-sized chunks, and then send out a weekly email to the board to say, okay, here's what we've done. Here's what we've done, either based on agreement from a previous board meeting or what I'm recommending, and then I'll proceed unless anyone. I don't want to burden everyone with approving individual proposals, but I guess maybe asking for forgiveness more than permission. But make sure everyone's aware, but not. I just don't want to. I just see it going off on a tangent with
No.
huge discussions about certain minor changes.
Okay, that makes sense to me. Good. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah, that's very helpful, and I'll just continue to do some additional research. But that helped a lot. Yes, thank you.
Okay. All right.
Grant, just to Dale's conversation there. So there's bylaws, there's policies, and then there's also procedures, is there not?
Well, there is, some groups have procedures. So procedures are often about exactly how to do something. They're not
Yeah,
about certain principles. So if
right.
there's, again, to use my example of being reimbursed for expenses, then there could be a procedure. These are the steps you do to, get your money that the organization owes you because it was a organizational expense.
Right.
But the principle would be a policy. We
Okay.
will reimburse people for out-of-pocket costs on the following matters, and then stop. And then the procedure is what follows that.
The expense form.
Yeah,
How to fill out the expense form
yeah.
example.
So
Okay.
that's right. It's part of the procedures. And I
Okay.
think trying to keep those things separate too is often could be an advantage, so that the board doesn't get itself wrapped up in a lot of details that they may not have, they take up a lot of their time, and they may not be the best suited to work the details on. So yes, thank you for that clarification on procedures. Anything else? Michelle, anything?
No, everything's been great. Thanks.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll thank you all for the three of you for being keeners, which you've been through these three sessions on stronger governance. I'm hoping that some of these things, from what I gather already from you tonight, some of these ideas may flower in your boardrooms over the coming months, and that would make me really happy. And Jan has already said, I have a website with resources on it and more than you ever really want to know about the topics that we're talked about. Certainly, there's lots on policies on my website. But I'm hoping you and the board members will make use of some of that material over time. And anytime you have a question on boards or governance, I'm happy to respond to an email.
Great. Thank you so much, Grant. This has been so enlightening. The last three webinars on this topic. It's yeah, we could have three more and just get into, there's a lot to get into. So what I will do is I'll send a follow-up email in a day or two, and it'll have a link to the recording of this webinar as well as some of those resources. So Grant's site. I'll in particular highlight the board calendar link, as well as the guests in the boardroom link, as well as a few others. And there'll be a feedback survey link there as well. And then, of course, all of the recordings of these webinars will be on our website. So you or any other colleagues or board members can go and take a look and rewatch if you like as well. And the presentation slides will be available online as well. So thank you so much for your attention and for sharing about your boards as well and the challenges and the good stuff that's happening. It's really great to hear that we've got some pretty functional organizations out there. I mean, you often hear about boards can be, no, it's a nightmare, but I mean, they're not necessarily a nightmare, and they are kind of fun and interesting to be a part of. And it's great when a board is working well and you've accomplished something really wonderful, and that's something to celebrate. So I hope you have some things to celebrate in the coming months. Yeah, thanks again for your attention and happy trails.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thanks both Grant and Janet. You spent a lot of time on this and effort, and we really appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Most welcome. Most welcome.
Thank you very much.
Right,
Thank
Janet,
you.
I'll be in touch. Okay.
Bye.
Bye.